What's up, everybody? This is Alex Christoforou with the Duran, and I have with me via Moscow, Mark Sleboda, International Affairs and Security Analyst. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Istanbul Summit and what's going on in Syria. Mark Sleboda, welcome again to the Duran. It is a pleasure to have you here so we can discuss the meeting in Istanbul between Merkel, Macron, Putin, and Erdogan.
Hi, Alex. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the Duran.
So let's just get right into it, Mark. I'm sure a lot of people are interested to hear your views and your take as to what was discussed in Istanbul in what was a mini summit, I guess you could call it, a contact group to discuss the situation in Syria. Some people are saying that they're trying to find a peace solution. Others are saying that they won't be able to find much of anything. Of course, we have what's going on in Idlib on the ground. As we speak today, the situation is always dynamic and always fluid. And you provide a special expertise in the area. And I think people are going to be very interested to hear your take as to the meeting in Istanbul, as well as to what's going on today in Idlib. So, Mark, take it away.
Yeah, I don't think it takes a advanced degree in international relations to be able to read the news reports from this Istanbul Summit with Putin, Erdogan, Macron, and Merkel. They're calling it the quartet. Notice the Syrian government nor the rebels in any way are represented at this meeting except by their interlocutors. I think everyone can see this meeting for what it was. It was largely a talking shop and a photo opportunity. I'm sure that you all saw the smiling pictures of Macron and Merkel and Putin and Erdogan holding hands, and that was about the substance of it. However, it was not completely inconsequential for all of that. Because what it does indicate is that at least continental Europe will leave the UK out of this, where they're almost out of the EU, maybe, kind of, and they're much closer to the US position in all of this. But at least continental Europe has given up the ghost of regime change in Syria. And they have indicated by this that they are at least taking a degree of remove from themselves away from the U.S. position, which not only has announced that it will stay in Syria in perpetuity as long as basically Syria is allied with Iran and has Iranian troops or advisors or anything there, and until they get what they want in the political process, which means regime change by deconstruction of Syria, partition, and political blackmail, basically, a stranglehold on Syria's oil supplies into the east of the Euphrates. So Europe, at least Germany and France, they have the majority of the pool in the EU, and they're indicating that they're taking a step back from this. And they issued a communique. The communique basically contains the same BS talking points we've heard in every single Syrian summit, from Geneva 1 all the way through the Kerry meetings, all the way up through the most recent Ankara and Istanbul meetings. And then, everyone kind of agrees on them at this point. They've always agreed them, but everyone disagrees on how they're implemented and who implements them. All right. It's everyone agrees that there is only a political solution in Syria. Yeah, sure. At the end of the game, when all the jihadists are defeated, then there's a political solution. I think everyone agrees with that. The other side agrees with it the other way. As once the Syrian government is gone, then there will be a political solution. That's the way they always looked at it. So all of these statements are interpreted and have been interpreted quite differently by the sides. So only a political solution. Everyone agrees on the territorial integrity, meaning everyone agrees on the territorial integrity at the end of the day when the government I want has control in Damascus. The other ones are everyone agrees that there will eventually be internationally monitored elections. Everyone agrees on that. They demand a start of the constitutional committee for a constitutional process of reform. Everyone has long agreed on that. But again, who will attend and what will be decided there, that's what everyone has always disagreed about. They agree that you need more humanitarian aid and it has to be secured. And they agree on the right of return and the need to assist refugees to return. And we'll come back to that in a minute. And the one point there is they agree on the ceasefire, as they call it in Idlib, and the need to defeat terrorists. Mm-hmm. Now, anyone see the problem there? Because those 2 points that go together in the statement are actually oxymoronic. Because the terrorists, if we want to talk about only the terrorists that everyone agrees on, which would be at the very least Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, whatever they're calling themselves these days, and the Turkestan Islamic Party. But the other groups, Ahrar al-Sham, al-Zinki, the child head choppers, they have all put on official Turkish proxy uniforms, and they're no longer considered extremists for the purpose of this. But they're all intertwined in Idlib. I like to call it Idlibistan. And they're not going anywhere. And they haven't retreated from the demilitarized zone. And they haven't pulled away any weapons. And they haven't stopped attacking the nearby provinces of Syria, the regions of Syria, outside of the area of zone they control. So nothing has changed in that regard. And you can't have a ceasefire in Idlib and defeat the terrorists. Those are two mutually exclusive goals there. So this is the reason why, of course, this communique is largely BS talking points and cannot in any serious way be fulfilled, at least in particular regards to that last step.
So now, why did Russia go through this? Why did they go through this motion?
So the primary concern of this from the EU, and one of the major concerns for Turkey, is refugees.
Right.
All right. There are over 1 million refugees in Europe at this point. A large number of them, of course, in Germany, specifically from Syria. And Turkey has some 3.5 million Syrian refugees within its borders. Jordan also has an incredibly large number, and their interests are represented here. And for Turkey, this is the one thing that all Turks pretty much are politically united on, even those who, the minority, the substantial minority that are opposed to Erdogan and the AKP. Everyone agrees that they want these Syrians gone, that they're a drain on the national budget, that they're taking jobs away from them at a time when the Turkish economy is already in a bad situation, with the Turkish lira having dropped tremendously and only being supported at this moment by the Qataris, although the Turks now have hopes of Saudi funding by blackmail over this whole Khashoggi affair. But everyone in Turkey, the polls show 90% of the Turkish people really want these refugees gone. Erdogan's hope in all of this is the areas of Syria that he has conquered, the Jarablus corridor and the adjoining Idlib. At this point, he wants to drive all the Kurds out of these areas. Afrin is included in this, of course. Drive the Kurds completely out of these territories and create his own little proxy Syria along the length of northern Syria. And he's already done that essentially in two places. And this Idlib memorandum basically officiates that he's done this. And it has to be noted that the Gulf states have also taken a step back from this war. The Syrian government met a few weeks ago with representatives from Bahrain who were representing the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. And it was indicated that an agreement, a compromise has been reached. And basically the end of the regime change war by jihadi proxy has been announced. And they basically accepted that Assad, or at least the Ba'athist regime as it is in Syria, is not going anywhere, and they've agreed they'll have to deal with it. That they've basically lost this round. Of course, they're sure to get some concessions out of this whole affair, but that was agreed on. Now, for the EU, the problem with the refugees is political. And we've seen political unrest challenging the liberal establishment, center right, center left, status quo all across the EU. You now have a very combative government in Italy, whose one of the primary planks that they were elected on was this opposition to refugees and migration and so on. You've seen the same thing in Austria, in Hungary, and several other the Central and Eastern European countries. And France and Germany are not immune to it. Macron's ratings are tanked and have been that way for quite a while. And Merkel just lost another regional election in Hessenberg. And you saw the Alternative for Germany, the AfD, get into the Bundestag. They've got seats in there now for the first time. They're described as far right. And although for the most part, I find most of their proposals on immigration to be common sense, screening, security, that sorts of things. It's not like they want an end to all refugees, and you don't have to agree with them on everything politically to see that this clearly, the majority of the public is turning their way in this. So Merkel, the fragile coalition that keeps the German elite together, is very eager to see this politically resolved, at least have some type of answer for this. They're going home soon, and so on. And Russia's goal in all of this, one, is to, again, make sure that this degree of remove from the U.S., from the Trump administration, which has been taken over by the neocons, completely different from Trump's campaign rhetoric of getting out of Syria and why are we there? We're just supporting jihadis, etc. The neocons have completely taken over the Syria policy. And they've announced that the U.S. is never leaving their occupation of Syria, that they're there in perpetuity. They have a permanent military presence illegally occupying East Syria. So Putin wants the degree of remove between the EU and the U.S. officiated with at least the possibility of EU reconstruction. You could call it war reparations if you want. That's the way I prefer to see it. Basically, Russia's saying, if you want the refugee problem gone from your countries, then you're going to help us rebuild the country that you helped destroy. And so that's the deal making. And I don't expect a flood of European funds ever. Maybe we'll see a trickle in the coming months. They will have to show that Syria has at least begun some type of figment political process, despite the obvious reality that the Syrian government has won the war. There will be some political concessions, and they will be treated as a transition. And Europe has basically indicated that they will generally go along with this as long as they can save some face and walk back from their curse of #Assad must go, which has seen so many of them fade into political obscurity long before Assad. So that's the state of this summit in Istanbul. One of the primary talking points, of course, during this was the situation in Idlibistan. Right. And what we've seen officiated here, which the Russian government seems to love so much, if it finds a military political situation which cannot easily be resolved, it seems to love forming frozen conflicts. And this seems to be the cunning plan for dealing with this situation here as well. We talked a few weeks ago about almost a month ago about this Idlib memorandum, sometime called the Sochi Agreement, basically between Turkey and Russia. And in it, they agreed that there will be no immediate attack on Idlib, to liberate it from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and all their friends, and the Turks who are military occupying it alongside them. That there would be the creation of a so-called DMZ, a demilitarized zone, out of which the most agreed extremists, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Al-Qaeda, and the Turkestan Islamic Party were supposed to completely withdraw. And Turkey was supposed to guarantee that. And Turkey's proxies, in official proxy uniform, the National Liberation Front, which is the second biggest grouping there, they agreed to at least pull heavy weapons back from the DMZ. And I expressed my skepticism and my criticisms of this deal at extreme length in our previous video, and exactly the points that I raised have been met. Of course, Al-Qaeda, the Turkestan Islamic Party, and all the others, they haven't gone anywhere. Turkey has not managed to convince them to leave. If they really tried, they have not taken any military steps at all against them anywhere. In fact, they seem to cohabitate Idlib equally. And we've seen reported from Al Jazeera and others how Al-Qaeda provides security for Turkish military convoys. And certainly this whole Idlib, Idlibistan project couldn't survive 2 weeks without continual Turkish aid, fuel, food, ammunition, military supplies, everything. So the extremists haven't left. The National Liberation Front, the Turkish direct proxies, have made a show that they removed some heavy weapons, but there's actually hasn't been any proof of this, and I very much doubt that this is in any substantial way. But Russia has indicated, for whatever reason, that they are at the moment satisfied with this. However, attacks outside of this area of control, and it's Idlib, but it's also slivers of East Latakia. Latakia is the province bordering Idlib to the west. It's portions of northern Hama to the south, and portions of West Aleppo to the east. And attacks, both artillery, missiles, and actual raids against Syrian towns and cities have continued. They are continuing. The most recent was just 2 days ago. And of course, that is against the whole purpose of the ceasefire. If Turkey can't convince them to leave and can't uphold the ceasefire on the Al-Qaeda and friends rebels, which they are supposed to represent here, then of course this Idlib memorandum is not working as intended. Russia has expressed some growing concern, as has the Syrian government in recent days, that if these extremists do not leave the DMZ, then they are reserving the right to take military action against them. And with the raids and the attacks continuing, of course, this is common sense. At the very least, at least Putin has reiterated as his spokesman several times that this ceasefire, this DMZ, is only temporary, and we'll just have to hope for there. But even in the 2 days, since this Istanbul Summit happened, the Turkish military has reinforced their positions, their military posts in Idlib, yet again. And, there's renewed word of HTS, Al-Qaeda, digging more trenches and solidifying and fortifying their position yet again. So all this, in my opinion, all that's doing, this drawing this out, this play for time, is further entrenching both Turkish and Al-Qaeda and friends' positions in Idlib, and going to make it a harder nut to crack when it eventually does so. Russia may be hoping that come November, when U.S. sanctions against any country that buys Iranian oil come into effect — Turkey is very dependent on energy from Iran and has indicated that they are not going to stop purchasing oil from Iran under U.S. threat of sanctions — that they will have more room, and that Erdogan will have less room for political maneuver when this sanctions happen, and that it might be possible to begin an operation in Idlib. It will probably be piecemeal. We started to see some exchange of artillery fire, where the Syrian government has openly acknowledged that they're returning artillery and missile fire into the greater Idlibistan area at this point in response to the attacks and raids. But of probably more pressing concern, one of the attacks in the last year outside of this Idlib that was the most serious, at least as far as Russia is concerned, was a mass drone attack out of Idlib into the Hamaymim air base, which is the center of Russian military operations throughout Syria. And there was at least some 13 drones involved in just one attack. And the Russian Ministry of Defense has released a public report saying that the U.S. was officially not just coordinating this attack, but at the last stages actually conducting it. These were rather simple drones, commercial drones, flown out of Idlib, but they were met near the base with Russian electronic warfare jamming, which even U.S. generals have indicated is fairly advanced, and it's something that they would like to have but don't. And the Russian Ministry of Defense says the drones basically should have stopped operating at this point. But they didn't. They were switched to manual control. And the only way they were flown manually is during the entire time of this attack against Hamaymim, there was a U.S. Poseidon P-8 advanced reconnaissance naval aircraft flying off the coast of Syria, doing circles in a parallel to the area. And Russia has indicated that the U.S. basically not only was providing them satellite data but was manually taking control of them to conduct the final stages of the attack because of the Russian electronic warfare jamming. Now, eventually, Russia was able to take over control of about half of them and shoot the rest of them down with air defense. But, this is an indication of a quite open U.S. coordination with jihadists in Syria and an attack on a Russian base. And the Russian, Ministry of Defense takes such matters quite seriously, and hopefully they can impress on the political Kremlin the seriousness of the situation here. I think the final...
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The final thing I'd like to bring up is Erdogan's moves in recent days insofar as Syria. Of course, he's playing this political game and blackmailing Saudi Arabia and the U.S. with this whole Assad affair. But in an indication that he considers the Idlib matter to be resolved, and that he will retain control of Idlib through his proxies and al-Qaeda, there's no immediate danger of an attack there. Erdogan has begun attacks just in the last 24 hours on Kurds east of the Euphrates. And this means in U.S. occupied territory, we're talking about the Kurds, who are the YPG, who are part of the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the U.S. proxy forces in East Syria. And of course, wherever they are, there's always a possibility that there is U.S. troops there. So we are seeing a direct, essentially this is a NATO on NATO proxy conflict, very close to an actual hot war beginning in East Syria. Turkey has announced that discussed with the agreement, the tentative agreement with the U.S. that was supposedly reached on Manbij, which the Kurds were supposed to pull out, and joint U.S.-Turkish control patrols were supposed to take over control of the city. That hasn't happened, and Turkey has indicated it's discussed here and issued a final warning. But it's begun moves, and it's probably going to take military action to do the same thing east of the Euphrates that it has west, which is ethnically cleanse the Kurds from the border with Turkey and resettle their own proxies in that area. And the most likely target, I think we should all be watching in the coming days, is if Turkey takes direct military action against the town of Tal Abyad, which is a town just across the Turkish border, very, very not too far from the Iraqi border. Actually, it was before the conflict an Arab majority town. The Kurdish militias have control of the area, and most importantly, there's no U.S. military presence there. So this will be the safest place for Erdogan to begin military occupation of East Syria in an attempt to drive not just the Kurds, but in this case, the allied U.S. forces from the area.
Why is Erdogan taking such a risk, Mark? You said he's opening up fronts on the east, he's opening fronts on the west. Is he playing Russia and the U.S., or is this going to backfire on him? I mean, who's playing who here, and why would he open up these two fronts? It seems reckless. Or is it? Maybe it's not.
It is incredibly reckless. And Erdogan is, it must be admitted, a cunning Islamist beast. But he's bitten off so much more than he can chew at this point. A few years ago, Turkey was very proud of its zero problems policy with its neighbors, with all the countries that it had relations with immediately surrounding it, and all the major powers in the region. And he has managed to have problems with and piss off Russia, having shot down their planes, and Syria conducting a jihadi proxy war against them to overthrow their government. The United States over the problems with the Kurds, the pastors, their accusations over the coup attempt, however real that was or not. We won't go into that. But Armenia, Greece, Saudi Arabia now with this Assad affair and the relations with Qatar. He's even strained relations with Iran because of this whole Syria situation. Erdogan has pissed off everyone, and even Israel. And in the Middle East, you don't piss off both the U.S. and Russia and Saudi Arabia and Iran and Israel and stay in power very long. He's playing the card that he has. And Turkey is a geopolitical lynch point. Everyone needs Turkey. Russia and Syria need Turkey. Russia needs it for economic reasons. Another pipeline would be nice and so on. But far more importantly, Russia and Syria need Turkey to stop playing jihadi proxy war and get out of Syria to end this war. The United States needs Turkey and Turkish military bases to conduct military operations and for its control hegemony of the Middle East. And Saudi Arabia and Turkey are both rivals for the dominant position over the Middle East. They both are the two strongest powers on this side. Iran might represent a third pole, representing Shiite Islam further to the east. But right now there's very much a competition going on between Saudi Arabia and Turkey for geopolitical dominance, regional hegemony within the Middle East. Of course, in both situations, this is still done under the hub and spoke relationship of they're both effectively more or less U.S. client states for control of the region, but they're fighting amongst each other, which of course is a situation that any practical and rational U.S. administration would try to avoid at any costs. But neither Obama nor Trump seems to be managing this play for the beta role in the Middle East between them very well. So Erdogan, I mean, it's not only Syria, he's also continually conducting attacks into Iraq against Kurds who are there as well. He respects none of his neighbors' borders, and no one is willing to do anything because everyone needs him, or they need Turkey at this point. And that should be the most important thing to remember, is they need Turkey, but they don't need Erdogan. And He may have bought some short-term security for himself and his regime, but I would not bet on his long continuance in a leadership position in Turkey within the next few years. Revenge is a dish best served cold. So enjoy the game that you've played while it lasts, Erdogan.
Words of wisdom, Mark Sleboda, International Affairs and Security Analyst. Thank you for a great breakdown on the Istanbul Summit about Syria and what's going on in Syria and Idlib province. Mark Sleboda, International Affairs and Security Analyst, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button, click on the notifications bell, go to the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt. It really helps us out. And in the description box, you will find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Please donate. Once again, it really helps us out to create videos like this for you with Mark Sleboda via Moscow. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Alex.
Till next time, take care.
Take care.